trying to urinate after FGM is a really traumatizing experience within itself, because one, is not as easy anymore, and two, it hurts, it stings, it's painful, and you just have to live through it. You know, you'll be fine eventually. It's okay, this pain will go away. There's no, you know, let me take you to a doctor, let me see if there's anything wrong, let me see if you've got an infection. No, you just had to live through it or die. There's no other option, really. So many young women have bled to death because of this procedure. And I am so lucky that I didn't bleed to death at the front of my grandma's house. I am truly, truly grateful that I wasn't part of, you know, the hundreds and thousands, if not millions, that have lost their lives to this procedure.
And were any other women in your family subject to that?
Everyone. Older than me, anyway, even younger, everyone.
Female genital mutilation refers to all procedures that involve partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. There is no benefit to this practice, unlike male circumcision, which it is often compared to, nor does it hold the same minimal risks that male circumcision has. The immediate complications of FGM include severe pain, excessive bleeding, genital tissue swelling, fever, infections, including tetanus, urinary problems, wound healing problems, injury to surrounding genital tissue, shock, and death. Long-term complications include urinary problems, painful urination, urinary tract infections, vaginal problems, menstrual problems, scar tissue and keloid, sexual problems, and increased risk of childbirth complications, including newborn deaths and need for later surgeries, as well as psychological problems. The term mutilation is meant to accurately refer to the horrors of this practice, which only occur because of a desire to prepare a girl for marriage, for social acceptance due to social norms, and for the pleasure of men. You are meant to be repulsed and shocked by the phrase. You are supposed to feel uncomfortable. FGM doesn't appear to be censored on TikTok or their social media sites, but plenty of other words are. Rape is referred to as grape. Death is referred to as being unalive. Sex becomes segs. In turn, these words are censored or replaced with euphemisms in order to allow content to override an algorithm that demonetizes or hides content using these words entirely. Others avoid creating content on these topics to avoid being shadow banned or removed from a platform altogether. While this doesn't stop these topics from being discussed, it does often make the discussion around these topics seem juvenile and unserious. It undercuts the severity of topics like rape, suicide, war, and abuse, and by replacing accurate words with fluffy replacements, it often prevents those from using those words or listening to them from truly understanding what is being said, and from empathizing with the topics at hand. In other cases, phrases and words that are more palatable have replaced accurate wording in order to make the topic at hand seem better. Strangulation is now choking, and considered a norma and vanilla kink.
If a man chokes you, he will kill you. Choking is considered strangulation. All it takes is one time and 3 pounds of pressure for you to have brain damage and for you to lose your life.
Role-playing rape is called consensual non-consent.
If the sex isn't borderline domestic violence, I don't want it.
And of course, entire topics are heavily controlled and censored, not because they are inherently offensive or cause harm, but because they go against the political or personal beliefs of the group in power on that platform. As was written in an article titled, "Censorship Hinders Critical Thinking and Infringes on Readers' Rights," Julie Gorletsky writes, according to Oxford Languages, censorship means the suppression or prohibition of any parts of books, films, news, etc. that are considered obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. While the definition is a useful starting point, it omits the actor. This is critical because it is a person who determines whether texts are obscene, politically unacceptable, or dangerous, and people's interpretation of text in relation to these criteria differ. Some people find nudity and sex to be obscene. Others find depictions of violence and war offensive. Some people object to references to demons, angels, and deities, and others prefer texts that include them. In a diverse, pluralistic society, considerations about what content should be censored and why reflect an enduring tension that seems inherent to democracy. Criteria matters in censorship decisions, but even more relevant is power. In other words, whose viewpoints are enacted and whose perspectives are ignored. Who decides what is obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security? And who is affected by these decisions? In some cases, lines of authority are clear. More often, they are not. In other words, who is to say that those who are deciding what needs to be censored are choosing the right things to censor? Censorship, at its heart, stems from a belief that one's personal morals and principles are better than everyone else's, and paternalistically, that those beliefs should be imposed on everyone, regardless of what they personally believe. Therefore, censorship becomes not only a manner of controlling information or content, but of controlling the population as a whole. Pretending that reality is nicer than it is removes the impetus to change anything. Strangulation is just a kink if we call it choking. If we never read books about slavery and remove all the slurs from historical books, it's easier to ignore what those same words mean when used today. Additionally, it prevents people from drawing their own conclusions and from using critical thinking skills to determine their own stance on various issues. As Gorleski notes, learners who never encounter challenging content are unprepared for authentic participation in our society. Having never considered alternative perspectives, they may not be prepared to explicate their own beliefs.
As a millennial, I've really seen the evolution of social media from the beginnings of Facebook and people sharing their, food and very mundane life events on social media. And that's how it kind of started, with actual friendships and social circles, to now what it is. And it's interesting to see the evolution of it, because now almost every single content that's generated is targeting some sort of audience, or there's some sort of ad related to it, or some sort of course that's being sold. And the purpose, all of it has now become to make money as quickly and as fast as possible. But one other very key feature that I've noticed has changed in the way we consume social media is the application of critical thinking. For example, you have anyone now can start a podcast or start a channel, which is awesome, because now it's kind of democratizing the access to what your views are, what your experiences are, and allowing people to learn from personal experiences, which I think is the positive aspect of this. However, I think a lot of people on social media consuming have lost is the ability to think critically about what's being presented to them. And I find a lot of people just take on face value whatever people say is their story as the ultimate truth. And yes, a lot of experiences are subjective truths about, if someone said something to me that makes me feel a certain way, and I come on here and say, hey, X and X is such a bad person because they make me feel ABC. But that feeling is subjective. And yes, sometimes the actions and behaviors are also objectively bad. But I find a lot of people and a lot of things that are said on social media are very subjective. And yet people don't have the distinction or the ability to distinct between what is objective and what is just a subjective experience from this person that's saying something. Let me give an example. There was a lady that came across my For You page who was talking about relationships, and she's like, oh, if a dude knows how to act in front of camera or knows how to thirst trap, for example, then why would you want to date this person? Because then he knows how to attract that kind of attention. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can kind of see what this user is trying to say. And then I go on her profile and I scroll on her page, and then a few posts later, it's literally her doing a thirst trap and very seductive in front of the camera, with minimal amounts of clothing. And so that just immediately tells me that, okay, well, you're saying one thing, but you're doing another thing. And I think actions speak louder than words. Words are something that, we say things of how we envision or how we want to be, but our actions really give away what we truly are. And so I would encourage people, Gen Zers, anyone else on this platform, everyone using it actually, even me, myself, I find sometimes I'm not using my critical thinking skills and just taking on face value whatever someone tells me. I encourage everyone to actually pause and think. If you're going to make decisions or form ideas and concepts about the world, about politics, about good people, bad people, before you go and make a judgment based on one video that is someone's subjective perspective, take the time to critically think and see whether the actions of those individuals are lining up to their words. And if so, that person may be credible. But again, that is just one piece of evidence and one piece of perspective. And this is something that you need to cultivate, this ability of critical thinking, which I unfortunately keep seeing a decline of.
It is common for many people to get their opinions by merely agreeing with people of authority who already agree with them on other points, by ascribing beliefs and personality traits to labels such as conservative, liberal, gay, or straight. Audiences can bypass having to find or consume material of their own to construct their own opinions. Conflicting information is labeled as immoral or bigoted and thus are avoided, even if they are not outright censored, although much of it still is.
These are some of the most banned books in the US today, but book banning isn't a recent issue. In fact, it's been going on for centuries. The first book to be banned was actually published in 1637 by an English businessman called Thomas Morton. In 1624, he arrived to Massachusetts with a group of Puritans, but he soon realized he didn't like their conventional values and strict rules, so he left. He went on to establish his own colony, now it's known as Quincy, Massachusetts, with all of the old world rules that the Puritans hated. Then he was exiled by the Puritan militia and wrote a tell-all book called The New English Canaan. In it, he critiqued the Puritan customs so harshly that even the more progressive New English settlers disapproved of it. I mean, when the book compares you to a crustacean, it's unlikely you're going to be asking the author for a sequel. So the Puritans banned it, making it likely the first book to be banned in the US.
Many seem to support censorship as long as it is an idea they feel is offensive or wrong. Parents who petition school boards to remove books like Tom Sawyer or To Kill a Mockingbird do so out of a belief that their children shouldn't be exposed to topics like racism, sex, or violence, regardless of the messages of those books. Similarly, the publishing industry now commonly uses sensitivity readers to censor and change books that might offend someone somewhere.
You've basically got it right for what a sensitivity reader is. An important key for sensitivity readers is you should belong to the marginalized background that you are reading for. You should be uniquely qualified to read for a character or a community because that is your lived experience. So, for example, I'm cisgendered. While I care about trans experiences, I wouldn't be the right person to read a book to make sure that the representation of the trans community is appropriate. So, how do you become one? First, you identify what identities you can read for. Then you need to build a platform or a portfolio. Basically, authors and publishers need to be able to find you. I believe the most traditional route is just reading for small authors or friends and building a network that way. You can also contact small publishers and let them know that you are available for work. You can list yourself as a sensitivity reader on Fiverr. Or if you have a platform like BookTok or Bookstagram, you can make sure that it's clear on there that you are open to sensitivity reading. Go forth and let your voice be heard.
Tip from a sensitivity reader: remove the words crazy and insane from your manuscript. Instead try wild, incensed, unreachable, unreasonable, unfair, nefarious, or cruel.
Angel Eduardo of The Fire criticizes the use of these services. He writes, "While the idea is to prevent offense and promote inclusivity, the reality is that sensitivity reading and the publishers who commission it foster a chilling effect on free speech, a sanitization of art, and a coercion of our larger cultural discourse. This is primarily due to the outrage culture perpetuated by the American left, which has also seen the suppression of criticism and opposition of topics like transgenderism or race supported by social media platforms. Notably, misogynistic language or threats of violence against women are rarely deemed worthy of being censored, especially in the same laws which consider using accurate sex-based pronouns to be hate speech."
Major free speech concerns over Scotland's new hate crime law. It makes it a crime to say something insulting about someone's age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, or transgender identity. So if you misidentify someone, that's a hate crime in Scotland. That comes with a maximum sentence of 7 years in prison. What if you can't tell the difference? What if it's an accident? Rowling dared Scottish police to take action. She posted, "If they go after any woman for simply calling a man, I'll repeat that woman's words and they can charge us both at once." Or at the end in Scotland, if the accurate description of biological sex is deemed criminal. Jimmy Fallon called out the hypocrisy.
If the speech is controlled, as are the people. So for that reason, I applaud this all the way.
Social media is particularly interesting regarding free speech, as the debate on whether they are allowed to censor or control speech continues. While the First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. In other words, the United States should not be ruled by religion. No law should be made which respect an establishment of religion. And the people of the United States have a right to free speech, including criticism of the government. This is an important right, hence why it is the First Amendment, because it limits the rights of the United States government and protects citizens from tyranny from the government, as the control of free speech, the press, and religion can be used to infringe on personal liberties. This allows for a diverse group of people to live under one law without unduly being forced to conform to whatever is deemed the correct way to live. However, does free speech apply to social media? Free speech has not always been allowed in regards to books, movies, or protests. McCarthy's Red Scare punished those who were suspected to be communists. Books which were considered obscene or which criticized what a group considered to be above criticism have been removed from bookstores, libraries, or refused publication at all. For example, what many consider to be the first banned book of America was Thomas Morton's New English Canon, which included a withering critique of the Puritans and the society they were building, including the treatment of Native Americans. The Comstock Law restricted the sale and its distribution of erotica, anything related to birth control or abortion, and sex toys for being immoral and obscene.
The GOP wants to take us back to 1873, and reinstate the Comstock Act. Anthony Comstock was the man behind the act, and he was an anti-vice activist who was against abortion, contraception, and some other things. With the fall of Roe v. Wade, this opens the door for conservative groups like the Heritage Foundations to attack abortion and contraceptive access through the mail. Now that Roe is gone, the law springs back into life, according to Roger Saravino, the Vice President of Domestic Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Now, while Roger is referring to mailing of abortion pills or contraceptives, some want to take it even further. They not only want to eliminate abortion drugs, but any medical tools that are needed to perform abortions. The good news is this isn't possible without a Republican president in place. It wouldn't emerge until a Republican takes the White House and puts in place a Justice Department leadership that would be willing to enforce the law. The Biden administration will not prohibit the mailing of abortion pills as long as they are being used lawfully. To all the women that are conservative or conservative leaning, if you like having contraceptives, if you like having your freedoms, you need to vote accordingly. And I cannot emphasize that enough.
There is precedent for censorship, regardless of how often it opposes the First Amendment, as many such cases are on a local level and not a federal one. Additionally, the First Amendment only protects from government censorship, meaning that one can have their speech influenced, censored, or otherwise controlled at a personal level, which can include employers, social groups, school boards, or social media sites. The question arises, should censorship be allowed at all? In cases such as child pornography or incitement of violence, few would argue it shouldn't be. This is because allowing these would cause harm or have harm inextricably intertwined with their production. Conversely, pornography, which only involves adults in legal situations, is considered protected speech, despite the proven harm to its consumers and producers. When what is considered obscene, immoral, or worthy of censorship is at the whims of whoever currently holds the most social or legislative power, the only way to ensure that your right to speak freely is protected is to be absolutist. Just as you preserve the right to free speech, so do those you disagree with, because what it comes down to is, there's no guarantee that the people in power will always be those who agree with you on what is right and wrong. As long as it doesn't incite or rely on harming others, and that should only be defined by actual harm, supported by unbiased research. No speech, no book, and no art should be censored. This, dear viewers, is where we part. This, surprisingly, was not inspired by anything trans-related, although it does apply. This is because I was annoyed that I wasn't allowed to discuss the rape of Berlin openly, using big girl words, on YouTube. Because that's a real thing that happened. It's historical analysis, and it shouldn't be hidden or considered obscene to talk about a real historical event. And I find that incredibly frustrating that if I want to talk about these topics, I'll have to dumb my words down, use different words, use euphemisms. So the German women, they were touched in the no-no zone. That sounds so stupid, and it lightens what actually happened there. It's laughable to talk about it that way. We are adults here, and we should be able to use adult language to talk about adult topics. And fine, if you want to say 18 and under can't watch it, whatever, but I shouldn't be censored or have that video hidden because it's a topic that uses words that YouTube disagrees with. A part of this, I think, is because they don't want to pay for moderators who can actually go through and judge these things on a reasonable scale. But I just don't think it's right to censor any kind of word that's just potentially bad. And in a lot of cases, a lot of creators of YouTube videos, TikToks, whatever, they start censoring words they think might eventually come under fire. So even like on YouTube, you can say suicide, but you never know when that might change. So some people might start saying unalive instead. And even that's not going to last forever. It's not like people who run YouTube and TikTok don't know what words you're using. Eventually, those words are going to get caught up in the censors. They need to find a new word. And each time this happens, who wants to continue fighting so hard to discuss these topics? Many people are just going to give up and just not discuss anything difficult at all. And there we go. We're living in an idiocracy because it's so much easier to talk about stupid stuff like Taylor Swift's new album or who wore what at the Met Gala than just to talk about actual important topics because you'd have to basically bleep yourself out every 5 seconds. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.